Hi, everybody. This is a little video that goes along with your key signature study guide. And this is my first time trying Screencastify. Yay! So you can't see me because I don't have a webcam, but I have a little mic. So hopefully you can hear me. If you can't hear me, you need to turn up your volume because I'm going to be explaining things as I go. Notice my little pointer here. It's fun. So key signatures, that's what we're talking about today. Please make sure you have out your worksheet and a pen or pencil just to keep notes on, and we'll be going through all of this together. Yay, let's get to it. So first things first, sorry, this is a little fuzzy, but the first thing that you see on your worksheet is about an interval. And an interval is the musical distance between two pitches. And they can be melodic, like this, from one pitch to the next. And that's an interval from this pitch to that pitch. Or it can be harmonic, where they happen at the same time. So it's from this pitch down here to this pitch, the distance between those two or these two. Yeah. So that's what you'll fill in there. Intervals, the musical distance between two pitches. Great. Moving on. A half step is from one pitch to the very next. And so I pulled up a keyboard for you to look at because I just feel like that's easier to explain. Because you have a visual. So this is a keyboard, right? And if you play piano, you're used to this. But if not, that's okay. You will always have this. You can use this on tests. I'll always make sure you have this available to you. So a half step is literally from one key, so this is a key, right, to the very next key. And this black key right here, the C sharp key, is the very next. So a half step would be from C to C sharp. Another half step would be C sharp to D, and so on and so forth. Notice that E to F is a half step because there's no black key in between, and B to C is also a half step because there's no black key in between. So each of those half steps, okay? A whole step then, this almost seems like ridiculously easy, but a whole step is two half steps together, right? Because two halves equal a whole. And so you can think of it as two keys or, from one letter to the next letter. Those are just a couple ways to think about it. So for example, C to D is actually a whole step. So you can think C to C sharp is a half step, and then C sharp to D is a half step. And so two halves make a whole. So E to F sharp would be a whole step, right? Or F sharp to G sharp is a whole step. Those are all whole steps. It's really important you understand those two things because that's how we build scales. That's how we do scale construction, at least before we learn the shortcuts for the key signatures, right? So moving on. You should already know this, but just in case, this is a sharp. It raises a pitch a half step, right? So we go forward on that keyboard, we raise it up a step. That's a sharp. A flat lowers a pitch a half step, right? On the keyboard, goes down one. And then a natural cancels out any sharp or flat, and it can cancel out a sharp or flat in the key signature as well, which we'll look at in just a second. But this cancels out a sharp or flat that you see on the note or in the key signature. So a scale, what we're going to be working on today, it's a set of pitches that follows a specific pattern of whole and half steps. So right now up here is a scale. It's actually the C major scale, right? And that's the one we're used to that has no sharps or flats. And you see that it starts on C and it ends on C, right? So do to do. And it does follow a pattern that we'll learn about in just a second. A key signature is a collection of flats or sharps at the beginning of the staff telling us what scale we'll be using. So C, because it doesn't use any sharps or flats, doesn't have sharps or flats in the key signature. This one, though, is the key of B flat, which we'll learn why later. But this is what tells you what scale we'll be using. What we'll be doing in just a second is understanding how to create that scale in the first place. This is just the shortcut. Okay, so the shortcut, but we're going to learn that actual way. So without dilly-dallying anymore, here is how we create our major scale. So we talked about whole steps and half steps, right? And we'll be looking at a keyboard in just a second, but I want to give you this pattern. And it says on your worksheet, it gives you, it says the whole step, half step pattern for a major scale is it's whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So you can think 2 holes and a half, 3 holes and a half, whatever helps you to remember it. And notice it's from one note to the next. So we're almost thinking of the whole step being in between each note because that's what is happening as we go to the next pitch, right? So from C to D is a whole step, D to E is a whole step, and then if you remember from our keyboard, E to F is a half step, right? There isn't a black key in the middle of that, and then so on and so forth. You keep following this pattern anytime you want to do a major scale, and it works every time, no matter what pitch you start on. The only thing that you're not allowed to change is the first pitch and the last pitch. And by change, I just mean when we're constructing the scale, you'll be adding sharps or flats to each pitch to fit this pattern, right? The only thing you can't change is the first note or the last note because those are the name of the key and you can't change those, right? Then you're changing the whole scale and it doesn't even matter that you did everything in the middle. So, with that being said, let's do one together. And it's actually below, and you can kind of see it and cheat a little bit, but we're going to walk through it together. So, we're going to do the key of D major. And so, D major, it's right here. This is what we're starting on, right? We are going to use that pattern. But first, we have to write out all our letters, right? So, we're going to go D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. We're just going to write out every single letter, right? So, we've got all the letters that we're going to be using from D to D. Then we're going to plug in that whole step, half step pattern. Now, for computer, I just to use these carets went like above the scale. It doesn't matter. It can be below. I always write them below. Doesn't matter. So we're thinking now from D to E has to be a whole step, half step, whole step, so on and so forth. Totally tripping over my words, but we're thinking this pattern now. So we're actually going to do that. So we're going to start at D. We know the first step has to be a whole step. So looking at D, we're going to go up a whole step. So this is a half step, and this makes it a whole step. So we land on E. This is the note we have to use. So we don't have to do anything to it, right? E is natural. From E to F needs to also be a whole step. So here we go, half step, whole step. Notice we're landing on F sharp, and right now it's only F. So what we need to do is add a sharp to that F to make it a whole step. So from E to F sharp is a whole step. Now from F sharp to G, we only need a half step, right? So we go to a half step and that actually does land on G. So G can be left alone. That's a half step. G to A, 1, 2, whole step. So A is good. You don't have to mess with that. A to B needs to be a whole step. So A, B. So that's a whole step. Good. We don't have to do anything there. And then B to C, we actually need a whole step, and that's only a half step right now. So what we need to think is going up one more note, which would actually bring us to C sharp. So we're going to add a sharp there. And then from C sharp to D, we need a half step, and it is already a half step, right? It should always end up, you know you've done it right when this note doesn't get changed, right? This note will not be changed because it's the same as this one, right? And we can't change that one. So that's kind of how you construct a scale with the whole step, half step pattern. And that's the basis of constructing scales. Key signatures actually come after, right? So we learn how to construct the scale, and then we've got these shortcuts for each key, flats and sharp keys. You can read at the bottom of that worksheet kind of some things to remember, some tips. Read through those on your own. Flip the page, we're going to look at shortcuts for these different types of key signatures. So a lot of you actually know these and you didn't know that construction. But we're going to review the shortcuts anyway, just to be safe. So we're going to start with flats. Flats, always, 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 this is the shortcut, right? So even if I were to be like, okay, do an A flat scale, but without the key signature, you would still be able to do it this way. Yeah. And it just works the same exact way as this one did. But this is the shortcut. So flats always occur in the order B, E, A, D, G, C, F. And you actually, oh, sorry about that. And you can actually see that on the key signature. So B, E, A, D, G, C, F. Yeah. So the shortcut rule, and this is where you can fill that blank in. for key signatures containing flats is the second to last flat in the key signature is the name of the key. So in this case, we have 7 flats, which is crazy. You would never get this, but maybe. You would find that second to last flat, right? This is the last one. F is the last one. So the second to last one is going to be C flat, which means that this key signature represents C flat major. Crazy, right? But it also means that if you only had 3 flats, for example, you only had B, E, and A, pretend that these don't exist, these 4, then your last flat would be A flat, meaning your second to last flat is E flat, and that would be the name of your key if you only had 3 flats. So that's kind of how the flat key works, right? But when you want to be safe and you're really not sure, you can always go back to this, right? You can always go back and figure out, okay, I know that A flat has 4 flats because I followed this pattern and I found it myself. So you can always do that if you want to. Good. The only exception to the flat rule is the key of F because there's only one flat, right? And when there's only one flat, it's always going to be the key of F. Always, always. It just is. If you want to be super fancy, like think really critically about it, when you're looking at this and there's only one flat, you can almost go backwards to F, and that's like quote unquote the second to last. Only if that helps you to remember, but if that's only confusing you, don't worry about it. We always talk about the first flat, right? When there's only one flat, it's the first flat, which is the key of F. And that's a really easy way to remember it too. Okay, so sharps. Sorry, this is so fuzzy. I'm the worst. Okay. Oh, that's supposed to say sharps. Sharps always occur in this order. F, C, G, D, A, E, B. Notice it's backwards from flats, right? So this one is just this one backwards. And there's a reason for that, but we won't get into that right now. And if you look at the key signature, which is kind of fuzzy, you can see that it is F, C, G, D, A, E, B. You can think of it as fat cats go down alleys eating birds or whatever you want, right? But the shortcut rule for this is that the last key, but this is kind of written weird, but basically you're going to find the last sharp, which happens to be B in this case, B, and you're going to go up a half step. So if you look at your piano, if you need to, and you look at the key B, up a half step is actually C. But C is already sharped in the key signature. And so we're actually going to say that it is the key of C sharp because C is already sharped in the key signature. That's confusing and honestly won't happen a whole bunch. It only happens in these 2 keys. But most of the time you'll have 5 or less sharps. So again, let's say there's only 3 sharps, right? We have F, C, and G, and these guys don't exist. That means G sharp is our last sharp. We're going to see G sharp on our keyboard and we're going to go up a half step and that makes it A. The other way that we think about it a lot is thinking that this last sharp is T and it's leading to Do, which is the next letter, right? And so G sharp is T, which means A is going to be Do. That's another way to think about it. This shortcut is arguably harder than the flat key, but honestly, the more you get used to it and the more you understand a piano, the more you should be able to figure out this rule pretty easily. So sorry, this is supposed to say sharps. Sharps, okay? The key of C major, so that's the other exception that doesn't apply to any of these shortcuts. You just have to remember that C major always has 0 sharps or flats. You don't see any sharps or flats, right? So when you see a key signature that is completely blank, you know it is in the key of C major, and you don't have to worry about accidentals, which is really nice. So that is your little worksheet and video for sharps and flats. You can find the little practice pages where I give you several examples to do. Just make sure you upload that. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. But I really hope that this has helped to clear some things up as far as constructing scales, because I know it can be super confusing. So let me know, and I hope this helps.